All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us on this Thursday afternoon for another installment of Startup Grind in New York City. This time with a founder who's figured out a way to use AI to save the planet instead of destroy it like we see in all those sci-fi movies. My name is Joshua Ness. I'm the director here at Startup Grind New York City. I'm also a senior manager at Verizon 5G Labs, where I work with startups, academia, and enterprise teams to build a 5G powered world. Startup Grind is the world's largest community of startups, founders, innovators, and creators, bringing like-minded and diverse individuals together to give startups everywhere the education, opportunities, and access they need to build, grow, and scale their companies. Part of being on the Startup Grind team means having meaningful conversations like this that address certain aspects of building a company and how to deal with the grind that goes along with entrepreneurship. We also talk to experts about the advancement of technology, as well as exploring barriers to inclusion and how to create opportunities for representation and allyship in the community. And we're still in April, which means that it's still Funding Month. Funding Month is presented with Oracle for Startups at American Express, and it recognizes the stories, lessons learned, and best practices shared by founders and funders around the world. We have a special landing page showcasing all of our Funding Month events and speakers from around the world on startupgrind.com. So be sure to take advantage of all the knowledge being shared across global markets on how to fund your startup and keep it going. And you can check it out using the link that I will put in the chat. Having said all that, I'm very excited to introduce Kevin Berkemeyer from Station A. Kevin, how's it going today?
Good. It's going well. The day's coming to an end, but yeah, everything's going well so far.
Yeah, I like it when the day comes to an end, and especially if you're like me and you tend to take random Fridays off like tomorrow. So today is my Friday.
Yeah, I've got a 9-month-old like right on the other side of this wall who's sleeping. So if we're lucky, we might hear him, but hopefully not.
We'll be sure to keep it down. Everybody in the audience, keep it down, okay? So, Kevin, who are you and what is Station A? Give us a real quick primer.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kevin Berkemeyer, obviously. One of the co-founders, CEO of Station A. Originally from New York, grew up in Westchester, lived in the city. Now I've been in San Francisco for about 6 years. Station A is a software company. So we're a software-powered clean energy marketplace. And really our goal has kind of always been to make it as simple, kind of transparent, and cost-effective for anyone to buy clean energy. And so all we really need is an address or a list of addresses, and we can instantly provide this transparent view into the clean energy options for any given building, enabling more data-driven decisions on what to do, and then also enabling someone to take kind of that next step to solicit quotes from our marketplace, which now includes over 2,000 different providers, from like the developers of projects, the technology providers, the capital providers, and then the firms that build the projects as well. So we also, I'll just say like one more thing quickly, but we just have like an interesting history just because we were a software business unit inside of a really big company called NRG, which is one of the largest generators of electricity, one of the largest retail electricity providers. And then at the time, one of the largest renewable energy developers. And so a lot of the impetus to build like our platform and to kind of create what we created came out of our experience with this traditional kind of clean energy development process, where it's really hard for a building owner or building occupant to figure out what they should do, kind of where they should get started, and then even harder for them to figure out like who they should work with.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that here in just a little bit. Keep in mind, as we kick things off, everyone, please make sure to drop your questions into the chat. We'll be answering these throughout today's conversation. We'll also have an opportunity at the end of the conversation for you to tell the rest of us what you're working on and where you need help or how you can help others if you're able to. So to kick things off, Kevin, I did some reading, and it sounds like you've always been interested in energy from college all the way to starting this energy business through that method that you mentioned that we're going to talk about later. How did all that happen? Like, where were you when you were like, you know what, like energy is the future?
Yeah, I came out of college and probably like a lot of college grads, was unsure of what I wanted to do with my life. And I majored in economics and Spanish literature. I knew, that, I knew the things I liked. I knew that I, liked economics. I liked policy. I liked technology. And then I also really had an interest and a passion for doing something that would benefit the environment. And so, when I started to then, look more intentionally around like which fields to kind of go into, and talk to just like a ton of people, basically about those like three things I liked and wanting to do something that benefited the environment, it always like kept leading me towards energy, and then more specifically renewable energy. And so I was actually describing this exact thing to a person, to a woman at a 4th of July barbecue on the Lower East Side in New York City. And then she said, well, I have like one of my best friends has happened to recently found and start a clean energy company, a renewable energy company. And she said, would you like an intro? I was like, yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. So anyway, I got that job. And then the founder of that company is a woman named Deirdre Lord, who's become a mentor, a really good friend, and was on our board initially, and then is now an advisor to Station A. So that's kind of how I got in the space, but not a perfect story or maybe a replicable one necessarily.
No, those are the best ones. That makes me think I need to go attend more barbecues on the Lower East Side.
Yeah,
run into some really influential people, or at least people who know people.
I mean, I guess the lesson is you just got to talk about, what you want to do or what you like, and then opportunities can, present themselves.
Yeah. And they say that founders are the best salespeople of their own companies and of their own ideas. It's one of the reasons why founders shouldn't always be the ones to solicit feedback on ideas, or it can be difficult because they're usually such good salespeople that they can make any idea sound really good. But yeah, it's interesting that you were there and just talking about where your field of interest lies, and then even for folks in the audience who might not want to start a company, who might want to get started with one of those types of companies, being able to talk about your passions as passions and talk about them as something that you care about, and be able to articulate why.
Yep.
Can lead to some good open doors.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So you got started, but you didn't get started directly in renewables, did you? You said you spent time in things like in doing sales and analytics and trading. Was that just in regular energy? And did that teach you anything about the renewable energy or the sustainable energy market versus the standard fossil fuels market?
Actually, so that was like my first job at that energy company, that renewable energy company that came out of that barbecue intro. It was a company called Juice Energy. We were what's called a retail electricity provider. And the unique kind of angle there, the renewable energy angle, was that we bundled like providing just regular commodity electricity with a renewable energy credit. So like with the environmental benefit or attributes of like a solar installation or a wind, installation. And that was, pretty early for that type of structure. And then from there, I got more specifically into renewables and worked at First Solar. So that company, Juice Energy, their fate was closely tied to Lehman Brothers. So when Lehman Brothers went down, unfortunately, kind of wrapped up the business. And then a friend of mine in that company got recruited for a role at First Solar, and he didn't think it was a fit for him, but he thought it was a fit for me. So he kind of referred them to me. And then anyway, I started working there, and I was part of their like initial commercial team. And First Solar is a big, it's the biggest American solar company. They make panels, and then they also, at the time, were developing projects. And so I joined that company. And then 9 months in, they sent me to Asia. So I had the opportunity to basically pack up my apartment in New York in like a matter of weeks and then move to China. And I was in China for about 3 years and started that business. And I'd say that was like a very entrepreneurial experience in the sense that, I was literally told to move there and be the first one on the ground, start the business, build all the relationships, build the team, do the first projects, and then basically do the same thing in Thailand and Southeast Asia as well.
Wow. And did that experience continue to shape your view of sustainability?
Yeah, I think what's super interesting is that was a time period when the economics of renewable energy were just like improving. I mean, they're still improving, but like really significantly improving, and super interesting to kind of experience this dynamic of it being like a more expensive form of energy to it being like a really cost competitive form of energy, and so I think when I started in this space, it was definitely more of a niche kind of investment in area, mostly it was like early adopters buying stuff, and like kind of testing it out and like seeing what is solar and what are the economics of these projects. But by the time I left for solar, it was this incredible shift and just change in paradigm where solar was more competitive than fossil fuel generated electricity, or it was really starting to be more competitive, for the first time in a lot of geographies and markets, and that was like super exciting. So then it was something that we always expected and anticipated, but totally it shifted the conversation away from it being this like very niche thing to it being a mass market, scalable opportunity that not just benefits the environment but also provides economic value.
Mm-hmm. And then I imagine as the economies of scale really begin to improve, I imagine that's when bigger companies like NRG like to start getting involved in. And so you were like, it seems like every time you made a move, you were like dialing into something very specific about this topic that you really enjoyed, or this vertical that you really enjoyed of sustainable energy. And so it got to be that you were working on this project at NRG that ultimately got spun out and created Station A, right?
Yeah. And so NRG was interesting because we were in the Station A team was kind of an interesting team because it was originally this innovation team. And so, I joined that team and it was like just a different role for me. Because I'd say I went from like more like, business development and kind of project development, execution oriented things to innovation. And we, we were initially really focused on like, hey, let's go identify new technology, bring that into NRG, pilot the first of kind projects, pass it off to business units to go and scale. And so like super exciting, it's like identifying all this new stuff, bring it to this big company, letting this big company go and like, really scale it. And then I took over leadership of that team in 2015 and we kind of started to reorient, what we were focused on. I'd say we started to look more inwards and like, instead of identifying new technology kind of outside, how do we like build, things inside that would, add value and enable scale. And that's where, we kept running into this like status quo process of figuring out like what to do on a given building and it being super slow and inefficient and fragmented and, requiring a lot of manual workflows, and kind of ripe for automation. And a different approach, like a software driven approach. And so we started to kind of incrementally just build different tools that would automate, this really traditional kind of schleppy process. And that just gained more and more traction. And then to the point where we spun out in 2018.
So it sounds like that, which I imagine is probably true of a lot of emerging technologies and emerging verticals, that something new and innovative comes around and the old method of facilitating it is no longer works. It's outdated. And so there ends up being this vacuum of almost a process where something is now becoming more and more ready for adoption, but the ways in which the market is ready to to distribute it doesn't work anymore. And so it needs new people, or it needs people to come in with new ideas about how to take something where consumer preferences may have even shifted, and this new technology is here and available, and it probably doesn't behave the same way as the old one does. And it's going to take someone to think really creatively about how to bring that to the people that need it.
Yeah, I think like a huge barrier right now to scalability of clean energy is just accessibility of the information to be able to make a decision, to make a data-driven decision. And that's like one of the biggest barriers and constraints that we're trying to mitigate. And I think what's super interesting, you talk to most people and they're like, oh, renewable energy or solar or green energy, whatever, is just expensive and it's just for tree huggers. Absolutely false. Could it be more false? Like there are projects now being built, in the United States that are more cost competitive, than natural gas generated electricity, which is the cheapest, form of electricity. So, like 15, whatever, when I got in this space, I've got, a conservative uncle, and he was like, hey, Kevin, why don't you get a real job? And I'm like, what do you, I don't know. Whatever your definition of real job is, like, let's talk in 10 years. And I think, now it's really exciting to see this industry grow, but to really see, the economic kind of argument win. So yes, there's an environmental benefit, and that is excellent. But now there's a very clear economic benefit, and these resources need to and can scale because of that. So it's exciting.
Yeah. And I'm curious how it's been. Has it always been leading up to this for you? Because you didn't start a company out of college with no management experience, no field experience, or anything like that. It seems like you've had this succession of, or you've taken advantage of this succession of experiences that have almost prepared you to take over a company like this and bring this whole concept into the future. Has it felt like that along the way?
Yeah, I was definitely still learning. By no means a pro, but I would say that, yeah, there's a few things. I think every job I've had has kind of had an entrepreneurial component to it. Doing something new, for the first time. I've always gravitated towards those types of opportunities. It's kind of fun doing that in a big company where you have the resources. So it's kind of like a startup with resources. I'd say it's, probably even more fun, doing it on your own, like, especially with an excellent group of co-founders and an excellent team. Because it's just a different, it's more of yours, right? It's more of your teams, and you have, more of a, like a visceral impact, on the outcome, obviously. The second thing, I feel like it's a natural environment. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs and small business owners. And they've started like multiple different businesses. And my mom was a math teacher, and until I was born, and then she bought a business for my dad, and then took that over, became like a designer, and is like one of the best at her job in her field. And I had to grow up like taking naps under her desk as a kid. So I don't know. There's like something about the like entrepreneurial environment and startup environment that just feels normal and natural, and kind of like home, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I bet that's helped you deal with the valleys that go along with all of the high points. When you were first getting stationary off the ground after it was going independent in 2018, what was your first hurdle? I imagine it wasn't all just fun and games after a week or two. Like what was your first big wall where you were like, oh shoot, I don't necessarily have this big company to help out with things. I have to, as a company, I have to lead this company through this first obstacle. What was that?
Yeah, we came out, we had a few benefits. One was like we had worked on a product, and built it kind of inside of a customer, right? So we came out and we had a product that we could sell. Well, that we thought we could sell. And then two, we did, when we exited NRG, part of that deal was that they, were our first customer. So we had a first kind of paying customer. right out of the gate, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
But the first real hurdle was like, it's like the next customer and then fundraising. And in fundraising, everybody discounted NRG as a customer. It didn't even count because it was like, that's where you came from. Of course they're a customer.
Right.
Can you get other customers? So, there's just a series of tests where it's like, oh, can you get another customer? Okay, now can you get another customer that can pay you more? And et cetera, et cetera. But I'd say the biggest challenge was that fundraising. When we would speak to investors, we, because we came out of this big company, everybody thought we were like cushy corporate brats, that couldn't, cut it in the startup life, which I would say, I mean, if you look at like the founders, like our backgrounds, like we've done a lot of entrepreneurial things.
Mm-hmm.
And could it be further from the truth, being like corporate brats or whatever you want to call us. But, and so there was this perception that we couldn't hack it, and so, that was one thing we kind of had to overcome. And then we did a bunch of things to do that. And then another thing that was really tough was we talked to way too many investors that were just a no, before we even started talking to them.
Really?
Yeah. Like we talked to like 80 different investors, got a lot of no's. Those would have been those were no's walking in the door before we even opened our mouths. And I think that like a huge lesson that, that we learned was, we need to qualify investors just like they qualify us.
Mm-hmm. So
let's not talk to somebody who is, not going to invest in clean energy or in like the climate tech space. Let's pre-qualify them. Let's make sure that they are a good fit. And then, let's have a non-fundraising conversation with them to see if they'd be a good, cultural, kind of fit. And do we like them? And do we want to work with them? So that first process, I mean, honestly, it sucked. You get a lot of people who tell you how to run a business and how you don't know anything about an industry, because they read a book.
Right.
Not fun. So the second time around was a lot more fun.
What was one of the things that you did to convince people that you weren't just an empty corporate shirt, like that you and your team actually had the chops to take on this industry and build something worthwhile? Like you mentioned, you did a bunch of things to overcome that. What was one of them?
Yeah, I think, one was, simple stuff, some harder stuff. So the simple stuff was, like not having an office, right? Working out of a coffee shop,
mm-hmm.
Basic. We didn't have the money to have an office. But, do things like that, get customers, be scrappy and get customers fast. And, big credible ones who will talk and say nice things about you. And then, we like didn't pay ourselves. We kind of committed to like not paying ourselves for a period of time. And, we were fortunate at the time to be able to do that. I might say that was not the right decision, but, in hindsight, but, maybe that helped a little bit as well. And I know that, that's not a realistic option for a lot of people, but, it's some of those things I think definitely, like enable us to chip away at that.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned
getting to know us better, at the end of the day is a very simple thing, but
yeah. You mentioned that the second round was easier than the first. The second one just closed just last year, right?
Yeah, we closed a $4 million seed round last year. The first round was like $1 million safe note. And so that I can explain just like how it was easier or why it was easier.
Sure. Yeah, I love that.
We qualified, investors. So instead of pitching 80, we pitched 12. And we knew that pitching those 12, like those are the 12 that we would loved to work with, where we like had great relationships. We, valued and respected their opinions, kind of what they could bring into the company, alignment in values, alignment in like the vision of where the industry is going. I had a score sheet where, I effectively score them. And I would score them through like informal coffee chats. And, based on that conversation, do we like have the formal conversation with them or not, so pitch 12, got one, had a few other like term sheets in the works, but we ended up, really liking the first entity that provided us with the term sheet and move forward with them.
Nice. And what have you been able to do? How have you been able to grow since you got that latest round?
Yes, we doubled the team. The benefit of software company, like the only thing we spend money on is, really people. And so it's primarily been to, hire and grow like an exceptional team. And so we were 4, now we're 8. We should be 12 by the end of the year in the near future. And then, further expansion beyond that. But yeah, all to hire people.
Nice. And are we going back to coffee shops, or what's it going to look like post-pandemic?
Yeah, we'll see. I think consensus is, like we kind of intentionally just transition to being like more of a remote first company, to being a remote first company. Hire the best people wherever they are. And most of us are in the Bay Area. We just recently hired somebody on the East Coast in New Jersey. But I think we'll continue to hire, folks, the best folks wherever they are. And then have some sort of like hybrid approach. I think consensus is people like working at home, but people also like human contact and like interaction. And so, we'll probably get together in an office in whatever form, maybe a few days a week or something like that. But looking forward to those days.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So on the topic of investors, it sounds like you're legitimately trying to make the world a better place and like convince people that it's possible to make better choices. How do you balance that mission while also trying to provide a return for your investors? Is there a divergence, or is it pretty clear cut that if you can be successful at convincing people to take care of the planet, that you can also make money for the people who invested in you?
Yeah, I do not think that those are like mutually exclusive things by any means, and only becoming more intertwined, and I think that what's exciting about like the current stage of the space, going back to my previous point, is how much economic value there is in clean energy and deploying renewables on a building or on a big open field. But we've modeled and simulated solar and storage and solar plus storage on pretty much every non-residential building in the United States. So about 1 million buildings, 600,000 of those would achieve some positive savings from solar. And that savings is a non-trivial number. It's about 14 billion in total annual savings.
Wow.
So if all 600,000 of those buildings did what we told them to do, it would save $14 billion per year in electricity bill savings. So that's a real opportunity. And I think that, in the past, there were a handful of investors who have been focused on this space. It went through a little bit of a bust. And then I'd say now it's, there's tons of capital coming into the space. The whole market is changing. Climate change is, a more broadly accepted thing. The response to that is becoming more imminent and necessary, a serious response to that. Companies are waking up. ESG is like very much a new buzzword for all companies. And I think companies are going to have to start reporting, on their decarbonization plans and progress towards those ESG goals. And all of those things combined with like the economic value available, I think lead to a really interesting and exciting like exponential business opportunity that any investor should want to participate in or be a part of.
Who, as you're trying to do this, who is your competition? Who are you up against?
A lot of the competition is status quo, like existing process. What we're doing, it's like, I don't know if how familiar you are with like, Paul Graham's like Schlep business essay, but he talks about how Stripe is like a great business because it's this, business that really solved, this Schlep problem of credit card payments, that everyone was kind of doing on their own or trying to fix on their own. And I think in many respects, like what we're doing, is similar. It's taking a process, an outdated status quo, inefficient manual process, and automating that and making it far more efficient, simple, and transparent. And I think that is in many respects, like that traditional process is our competition. Yeah.
I was reading that a lot of the large-scale developers will have in-house platforms for how to provide energy for their networks of buildings. In some cases, they might be pursuing renewables, in some cases not. How is it working for you? And correct me if I'm wrong in how I'm seeing this marketplace, but how is it working for you if they are your competition? Let's say they have dozens of buildings, that in-house developers or that developer's in-house platform is your competition for those few dozen buildings. But you can also then, like, if you win, you convert them into a customer. Like, how does that? How do you create a growth strategy around that?
Yeah, well, I think like basically what when you boil down to it, the competition that we have really is, it's like Google searching some real estate database, like some real estate research, like utility cost research, what's called utility tariff research, and then some economic modeling in Excel. So a lot of people have like maybe an internal Excel model, where they evaluate solar for a given building, highly manual, building by building, type of analysis. It requires some expertise. So what we've effectively done is make it so that anybody can just input an address or thousands of addresses, doesn't matter, in less than a second, be able to understand, which ones solar makes economic sense on and, which don't. And so that has implications for like the developers of projects. So the developers of projects actually use us as a SaaS product, because we basically arm them with the tools to find customers, to find projects. And then those customers, the buyers of energy, the building owners and occupants, use us to evaluate their own portfolios. And then now with that marketplace, we're kind of connecting those dots. We're connecting the portfolios that evaluate themselves through us with the providers who are using us to kind of evaluate other buildings or find customers as well. So we actually started as a SaaS business, kind of intentionally. And then now we've evolved into creating this marketplace kind of purely based on demand from the building owner and occupant to more efficiently not just evaluate their buildings, but also then connect with all these providers in our network to build a project.
So when you say build a project, have there been any developers that have taken into account the renewable energy options when they are deciding where to build their next project?
Like their next building or?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Starting to. So we're actually about to release functionality that enables people to just like add buildings. So they can, in a map-based view, trace a building, add like a few basic attributes like building height, and then we spit out, a solar recommendation and, whether or not it would save that building money. And so, yeah, you're starting to see, honestly, anybody who's building a building today, if they're not building it to also be solar ready, it doesn't make any sense. Like any building today that is a new build should be built solar ready, because that's just kind of the opportunities on the table, and there's economic value there.
That's amazing. It's good that the developers are starting to take into account what those options are. And for them, I'm sure a lot of it makes economical sense, which just goes back to your original point about how much economical sense it does make to consider these types of solutions. As you mentioned that hiring is a big thing that you've done since you closed your last round, and one of the things that that you've talked about is how having the right team has made this much easier than it otherwise might have been. One of the things that when you and I spoke before, you talked about how you've structured your hiring process to bring in the best talent. What do you do that's unique, that's different from others?
I mean, not like rocket science, but being I'd say being like highly intentional and having it's a few things, like being intentional around like what you're looking for, right? So like, what is the criteria of the kind of person that you're looking for, and then structuring like a fairly robust and rigorous like process that, I mean, in some respects, like kind of puts a candidate through the ringer a bit, but really where you get to know each other, and it's not just like a one-way flow of information. It's a two-way flow. And we have full team involvement. I mean, we're a small company, so you kind of have to have at least kind of a good fit across the board. But we have like an introductory call, then we have some sort of assessment, like a product assessment or a strategic assessment, depending on the role, or like an open source code contribution that we do a code review on if it's a developer. Then we have like a broader team interview with the whole team, and that's more getting to know one another. So no like skill set, no skill specific discussion. And then we usually have like another presentation. That's like a pitch or like a product feature recommendation. And then lastly, reference checks. And then kind of if everything, checks out and there's a great, fit and, cultural add there, we make the decision and, extend an offer. But going back to like one of your points you made earlier, is like about, I think you're kind of starting to make the point or alluded to it, bringing in new perspectives, to the importance of that. And I think that's like been a kind of a core piece of at least our values is making sure that it's not a team filled of like energy veterans, that it's a team that does have like energy expertise, but that also has folks with tech expertise and outside energy expertise and a lot of learnings in other industries that could really benefit the energy space. And so of our team of 8, there's really 2 that have like deep energy expertise, and the rest come from all facets of life. And so that's been a really, I think, critical thing for us, especially as we're trying to change a process. You need that new perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of companies are waking up to the fact that a background of expertise and of or diversification of expertise and cultures and backgrounds ends up bringing so much to the table as far as new perspectives and new ways to solve problems and customer segments that might otherwise be overlooked. My team right now at 5G Labs is doing a lot in the accessibility space, and just working with and having people on our teams that bring those new ways of looking at things that really can help influence the direction of a product or of an entire technology is really great. It sounds a lot like your hiring process is similar to how you find quality investors too. It sounds like you're all about really getting to know values and making sure that fit is there before actually reaching out and extending the offer to work together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's kind of an intentional, like thoughtful component to a lot of it, like almost everything that we do. But yeah, it served us well. And I think, we have an exceptional team, and we've been super fortunate. We've hired folks who, had offers from Facebook and, from other, big tech firms, and accepted a, a lower salary or, maybe not as glamorous of a job, and definitely not with the like snack kitchen that a tech company has, or the benefits that a big tech company has.
Yeah.
To work on something more meaningful, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think it speaks a lot to also where the workforce is going. They want to be able to work on projects and work with companies that do have values and that are going to give them fulfillment in their work. And I think it's really great that you're able to bring that to the table. And I think it's something a lot of other companies, whether large companies or startups, for folks here in the audience, as they're thinking about how to hire and how to attract talent, making sure that you have the values that are there for a value alignment. If a company, it's hard to find a value-based fit if the company itself doesn't stand for anything.
Yeah.
And so making sure that the company is willing to put a stake in the ground, and be maybe polarizing, is going to be a way to bring the people who agree with you and who are passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about, to bring them to the table to want to work with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so more people should come into the space. It's a great industry and have a huge impact.
Well, let's talk about that. How has climate tech evolved as an industry, and where do you see the trends going?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think, super exciting what has just happened in the last like three months, and 4 months or whatever. The dialogue has completely changed. I mean, even just in the last, couple of years, but, you see like people waking up, right? And I don't want to discount like all the hard work, that folks have done in the background, to get people to wake up and to, take climate change seriously. But I think what's exciting is, there's just been a paradigm shift. You have now, like, year over year, a doubling of the number of companies that have made 100% clean energy commitments. I mean, that's incredible. You have just increasing demand across the board, and it's easier to access and to get these resources. It needs to be a lot easier. But, I think that people are starting to ask, people who you never expect, are starting to ask, like, hey, what would the solar opportunity be on this roof or in that roof? And I think that, for the first time, there's a real kind of conscious effort to, make clean energy more equitable as well. And, to target disadvantaged communities that maybe have not had some of these resources, or had considered or have had these resources as accessible, in the past as they should have been. So I think everything that is, like, from a trends perspective, everything that is like super exciting is just this like massive influx and increase in demand, and in awareness. And I think that is really, showing itself and manifesting itself in our business, and I think just across the space. So I think it's only becoming like a more exciting and interesting vertical, for investors, for like new companies to start in, for people to join from a work perspective.
Yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't hurt that there are, well, that's probably the wrong way to put it. I'm sure that the shift is accelerated by the fact that natural disasters around the world are increasing, and so people are scrambling to try and find ways, like, how can I have an impact? Like, what can my impact be?
Yeah.
I think it's great that you have positioned your company, or that you and the team have positioned the company to be able to raise your hand and say, "I'm it." Like this is a first step that you can take. Do you think that method that Station A has adopted, does that represent the future of how sustainable energy will be sourced and purchased? Like, is that only going to accelerate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because in the space, it's such an engineer's industry in the sense that a lot of people focus on the bright, shiny objects. It's like, how do we improve the efficiency of the solar panel? Like, how do we do more and more of that? Or how do we improve the efficiency of like X component, X piece of hardware? And you forget that you actually have to sell this thing, and you've got to convince somebody to buy it, right? Which is selling it. And that has really been overlooked. And it's all about accessibility and transparency and simplicity and like ease of, understanding the value. And I think that has to happen. And that is a constraint right now. And that's really the constraint that we're trying to mitigate and remove and eliminate. And so I think the future of procuring and buying clean energy has to change. I think it will change. It's inevitable. I think we'll play a hand in that. I think a lot of other people can too. And I think that is just good business. It's also critical, for the world. But I think that in particular is like a very like exciting opportunity. And our hope and our dream is that this can be a fully automated process so that you really can just go from address to like, buying clean energy in a kind of fully automated, kind of transparent experience, that doesn't require, the pain and the headache of the existing process.
It sounds like you, with your company and with this particular vertical, as probably the same in a lot of companies, but it's removing those friction points is probably the easiest thing that you can do for your sales cycle. Is just making it as easy and as one click as possible for one click to get someone to convert from something that already inherently has a lot more friction in it.
Yeah, definitely. And like we're realists. It's not going to happen overnight. Like you're not going to like have a drone deliver solar panels onto a building and
right.
After that one click. But there's a lot of room for improvement. Even the incremental changes are huge and make a huge impact. And I think that's been a big lesson of ours, over the years. And so, we know that the market needs to mature. Education needs to be there. We need to educate the market. We need to make it easier, and then continue to automate, as that market evolves.
So how can people like me or our audience get involved in making Station A's mission more mainstream and accessible? You mentioned it's only for commercial buildings. What role do regular people play?
Yeah, I mean, regular people like are super influential, right? I should say people are influential. I think our focus intentionally has been like non-residential, right now, just because we just see, a lot of white space and a lot of opportunity in the commercial sector to, unlock, the solar potential that's out there, that 14 billion of savings. But everyone's an important stakeholder, right? You work at a company, you maybe own a company, maybe you own a building, or maybe you occupy, a building, and you're an important stakeholder and influencer in the decisions that building makes. And I think, the reason that this market is moving is because, buyers are becoming more aware. The reason that is happening is because customers, building occupants, tenants, et cetera, are becoming more aware and are starting to ask questions and hold companies accountable. Where the decisions that those companies make about energy and environmental sustainability matter. And so the things that the calls to action would be, if you can be influential, or if you are curious and interested, if there is solar, potential on like a rooftop that you walk into, or or that you work in, or whatever, you can easily just go to stationa.com and click on Get Started and input an address.
Okay.
Get a view into like what is the solar potential for that building and what is the savings. So that would be one thing. And then, yeah, if you know of any building owners or occupants who are asking the question of like, should we do solar? We can easily answer that question in a matter of seconds, and it costs no money. And happy to help anybody kind of along that journey to figure it out, if that's possible.
Are you anticipating anything like a surge this year as people start going back into office buildings? Because right now, so many commercial buildings are empty or very low occupancy. Excuse me. Are you anticipating at all that as employees go back into the office, they're going to bring with them this new desire that has this new social awakening across the entire spectrum, but especially with the climate, where they will start leaning on their building managers and building owners to start exploring changes and opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hope so. I think what's interesting is there's there's probably like the bottoms up push, from customers and tenants and people work in buildings, and then there's the top down push. And so I think what we're now experiencing is both of those at the same time. And that is really interesting, a really interesting dynamic, because you have companies that are anticipating some reporting requirement, around, these like environmental goals and like where they stand and what their policy is. And that's forcing action. So, and that's, that's directly related to like both top down and bottoms up, kind of pressures. I mean, you go to I went to Goldman Sachs website the other day for like, just for the hell of it for the first time in a while. And their homepage is their environmental sustainability report for 2020.
Interesting.
So, companies that you may not expect, are really starting to develop a strategy, around, their environmental impact. And I think everyone has a hand in that. Yeah.
I've noticed how in New York City now, the city has mandated every building publicly display their energy grade. And I'm gonna tell you, nothing is above a C. Like everything is a C, a D, or like a straight up F. And I think as people start waking up to that, they're going to start asking the owners of their apartment buildings or the owners of their work offices, like, why is our grade a D? Like, what can we do? Like, we got to do something about this.
Yeah. So if you work in a building with a D, look up the address in Station A, and you can potentially start to see if there's some options. And again, happy to help, and it's no cost to evaluate a building. So.
That's great. Yeah, you heard it here, folks. Stationa.com. Enter in the address of your apartment building or your workspace, and see what the options are there. Thank you, Kevin, for this incredible dialogue, and a special thank you to our audience for joining in. I apologize, we ran out of time for those community shout outs, but definitely come back next time, and we'll be sure to open up the floor for the audience to tell us what you're working on. The conversation has been recorded and will be available in the next few days if anybody wants to share this with their communities. I know I'll be sharing it around to some folks that I've worked with this month on Earth Day and a lot of those other projects. A special thank you to Jillian Siegler for putting us together, one of my colleagues at Verizon. It was really kind of her to suggest you as a speaker, and really happy that it worked out.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll be back next month with more great stories from the entrepreneurship community. So be on the lookout for an announcement coming soon. You can find out more and view some of our previous interviews, including our earlier Funding Month interview with JD Weinstein from Oracle for Startups, on startupgrind.com and searching for the NYC chapter. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. This was awesome. I hope you have a good evening.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Adios.